still in the air. There's still no cure. There's still no vaccine. So we're out here, but this thing is still not over with. Our numbers are going up. Our death tolls are going up. So let's just be mindful of what we're doing. And again, at Chin Check Radio, if we can serve as a distraction with all that's going on while you're quarantined, if we can serve as a distraction, if you can take a trip down memory lane, that's what we are proud of. Continuing on with our top 10 boxes list, and I've said this on many occasions. This list is rather fun, but yet hard to do, but definitely more fun because it has taken me down memory lane about watching these great fights and these great fighters. When I talk about these great fights and fighters, some of you all have told me, wow, I didn't know that, and I had to Google that fight. Some of my new listeners and my new subscribers, and I've had people mention who are fight fans say, you know what, I do remember that fight, Chin Check Radio, and I had to go back and watch it again. Yes, and I realized how great that fight was. So we're very proud of that. We're just a program. We're just sharing our passion for the sweet science with you all, and it's something that's fun to do. And again, if this is a distraction during this crucial time in our history, then that's what we're proud of. The next fighter on our list is the living legend, the warrior, the real deal, Evander Holyfield. And why I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this particular broadcast, because this is a man who was never in a dogfight. This is a man who took on all comers, a guy who had absolutely no fear. And for me personally, my love for Evander Holyfield is he is the guy among all others who I really started to watch the sport because of him. Because in my years coming up, and again, understanding from 1990 on, was really the first star, even though Tyson was still around, but he already had lost to Douglas, he had went to prison. So around the time that when Holyfield was a champion and fighting his great fights, I watched him, and I watched him when he won. I felt I won. When he lost, I felt bad. I used to try to mimic a lot of his boxing skills, and I definitely love watching Holyfield. I'm definitely going to have too much fun talking about this, so definitely you all sit alongside me and have fun with me. We're going to pick up Holyfield's career from the 1984 Olympic Games, where he won a bronze medal in a very controversial fashion. He lands a punch right as the bell rang, and he was disqualified, robbed of a gold medal. Again, he was on that same U.S. Olympic boxing team with Mark Breland, the late Pernell Whitaker, Virgil Hill, Mark Breland, and he should have won a gold medal, and in fact won a disgusting bronze in an awful decision, along with the Roy Jones robbery just 4 years later in Seoul, Korea. We're going to pick up Holyfield's pro career in only his 12th professional fight. Let me say this again. In his 12th professional fight versus one Dwight Muhammad Cowie. Now, folks, 12th professional fight, Dwight Cowie from Camden, New Jersey, my home state. Now, I'm originally from Newark. Camden is south of Newark. Tough city. I mean, to come from there, you really have to be something that Camden is nothing to play with. Now, Cowie at the time had almost 30 fights, was a grizzled veteran. Holyfield was a young up-and-comer and gets a title shot versus Dwight Cowie. Now, really the tale of the tape. Holyfield stood about 6'2". Dwight Cowie was about 5'6", 5'7". So we're talking a short, thick, wide body, thick neck Dwight Cowie having to force a fight on the inside versus a Holyfield, taller, leaner, younger. And this is not just one of the great fights in cruiserweight boxing history, not one of the great fights in cruiserweight championship history, not one of the great fights in title history, one of the great fights in boxing history. Again, I just gave you the tail of the tape. Now, you would think Holyfield would stay on the outside, jab, and move, and he tried to do it. But for something that really was a precursor for Holyfield's career, to stand in there, stick his chin in there, and brawl. And folks, this was a back and forth fight These guys was trading leather, and you would score 1 round for Holyfield, 1 round for Cowie. 1 round for Holyfield, 1 round for Cowie. 1 round for Cowie, 1 round for Holyfield. So it was an even, dead fight. Guys going, back and forth. Holyfield in there, throwing his left hook, throwing his uppercut. You have Cowie, who knows his only way to be competitive in that fight is to fight on the inside, is to take the fight to Holyfield, is to rush the young fighter to see what he's made of. And Cowie fought and Holyfield fought. And really going into that 13th round, it was an even fight. I thought in the 13th round that Holyfield actually pulled ahead and pulled away by landing some beautiful combinations, by getting off faster, having faster hands. And I thought that he did win that fight via a split decision. So again, Holyfield, in only his 12th professional fight, has defeated Dwight Cowie, a Hall of Famer, wins the WBA Cruiserweight Heavyweight Championship of the world. Well, the Cruiserweight Championship of the world. In May of 1987, scores a TKO victory in the 3rd round against a Ricky Parkey to win the IBF Cruiserweight Championship of the world. Has a successful defense in a rematch against Dwight Muhammad Cowie in December of 1987, winning by KO in the 4th round. And in April of 1998, has a TKO in the 8th round against Carlos de Leon, winning the WBC and the Lineal Cruiserweight Championship of the world. So now Holyfield has united the WBA, the IBF, and the WBC Cruiserweight Championship, as well as being the Lineal Cruiserweight Champion of the world. So what do you do after uniting all the belts, after cleaning out the division? You move up to the next division, which is the heavyweight division. And as something that Holyfield has always stated, his goal was to be the heavyweight champion of the world. There's a beautiful ESPN 30 for 30 documentary that talks about chasing Tyson, which is Holyfield's quest to eventually land a big fight with Mike Tyson. So in his first fight at heavyweight, in July of 1988, has a referee stoppage against James Quick Tillis. Now, James Quick Tillis, if you guys don't know, was the first guy to take a young Mike Tyson the distance. In December of 1988, and then again another corner stoppage against former heavyweight title holder Pinklin Thomas. In March of 1989, scores a TKO victory in the 10th round versus another heavyweight titleist, the late Michael Dokes. And actually another competitive fight too, where Holyfield eventually pulled through. So Holyfield has stopped 3 heavyweights and 2 former heavyweight titleists. Now, which makes you wonder, in the 1980s, the heavyweight title was definitely splintered until it was finally unified by one Iron Mike Tyson. So Holyfield continues to move up in weight. Now, this fight really puts Holyfield on the map. October of 1990 versus Buster Douglas for the heavyweight championship of the world. Now, Evander Holyfield was in Tokyo that night when Douglas fought Tyson. There was a signed agreement for Tyson to fight Holyfield. Signed agreement, signed, sealed, and delivered, where Buster Douglas was really seen as a tune-up fight, a keep busy fight, a sacrificial lamb for Iron Mike. So eventually we can have that payday versus one Evander Holyfield. Of course, we all know what happened. I did a broadcast on that where Douglas has the biggest upset in boxing history, one of the biggest upsets in sports history, when he KOs Iron Mike and wins the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Now, what happens, they say when a fighter becomes champion, it makes him 50% a better fighter because he mentally is now a champion. He knows he can do it. So now mentally being a champion makes you work even harder, because the old saying is it's harder to climb the mountaintop than once you get there, can you still stay hungry? It's easy to be in the chase or the pursuit of a championship, but then when you win it, now you're the champ. Or the old saying is, you were the hunter, now you're the hunted. And when you're the heavyweight champion of the world, coming off of that type of knockout against Mike Tyson, seemingly invincible Mike Tyson, you tend to have a whole lot of media appearances. You're going in front of cameras, you're doing news, you're traveling, you're having victory parades. I remember Buster Douglas was on an episode of at that time, the World Wrestling Federation Saturday night's main event. That used to come on NBC. And I remember it was supposed to be for Iron Mike, but since Mike was knocked out, Buster Douglas stepped in. Again, you're not training. So when you're doing these media appearances, when you're doing professional wrestling, when you're here, there, and everywhere, when you're doing endorsements, you're not in the gym training, and you don't have the same hunger that you had when you were training to fight for the title. And clearly it's what happened in that fight, because Buster Douglas came in woefully out of shape, and I mean out of shape definitely in comparison to the shape he came in when he fought Iron Mike Tyson. And I thought Holyfield did a beautiful job boxing Douglas, even though he was a smaller man, boxing him beautifully, jabbing, left hooks on the inside, crisp hard punches. I mean, was a masterpiece. And the late Lou Duva in the corner kept telling Holyfield to keep working that belly no matter what he does, just keep working that belly. So in the third round, Douglas, already beaten, trying some roughhouse tactics, decides to throw an uppercut way from the other side of the ring. And Holyfield takes a step back, launches a counter right hand, catches Douglas right on the chin, drops Douglas. You see Holyfield backing away. The late fight doctor, Verdi Pacheco, says that the fight is over, and Douglas does not get up, and Holyfield wins the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Now, when you go back and watch that fight, what I do laugh about it until this day is that as he's announced the winner, the referee counts to 10. Naturally, Holyfield's corner, which had the late Lou Duva, Ronnie Shields, as they run into the ring, they literally jump over the body of Douglas, who's still laid out in the center of the ring, to celebrate with their fighter. So that's kind of funny when you watch the video. So now Evander Holyfield has won the undisputed and the Lanil Heavyweight Championship, and already won the undisputed and Lanil Cruiserweight Championship. So now when I talked about the word Lanil, what do I mean? When you trace the lineage, or simply put, the man who was undisputed champion, who beat the man who was undisputed champion, which is what Holyfield did. He beat Buster Douglas, who beat Mike Tyson. So there you go. He became the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. His first title defense was against the returning and the older George Foreman. The George Foreman who we know from HBO broadcasts. Older fight fans know him as a former heavyweight champion of the world from the 1970s, who was one of the most feared fighters on the planet, who destroyed the late Joe Frazier, who destroyed Ken Norton, the late Ken Norton, who lost his fight against the late Muhammad Ali in the Rumble of the Jungle. And for those of you who own a Foreman grill, who really don't know where the Foreman grill came from, that's who was named after, the former heavyweight champion of the world and HBO color commentator. Now, Foreman had taken some time off. He made a comeback. Now, at the time of Foreman's comeback, there was a hope to arrange a fight between him and one Mike Tyson. And at that time, Tyson was a younger puncher. Foreman was an older puncher, so it was definitely seen as a generational fight, that people were really pushing for that fight. And it just never materialized, especially with Tyson's loss versus Douglas and Holyfield beating Douglas. So it was only reasonable that Foreman would get his title shot against one Evander Holyfield. And that fight was seen as young versus old, experience versus youth, Foreman's punching power versus the skill of Evander Holyfield. Foreman clearly was a sentimental favorite for where he has transitioned from the mean guy from the 70s to the likable, bald-headed, slightly thicker guy during his comeback. And Holyfield won that fight by unanimous decision in April of 1991. And I believe it was that 7th or 8th round where Holyfield just unleashes on George Foreman. He couldn't drop Foreman because Foreman was naturally bigger than him, but unleashes on George Foreman. In November of 1991, in one of my favorite fights, scores a TKO victory over the late smoking Burt Cooper. Now, Burt Cooper, much like a Dwight Cowie, was a short, thick neck, wide, thick build, just a solid built guy. And Holyfield, if you're watching that fight again, was not boxing, wanted to stand in there and fight Burt Cooper's fight. In the third round, Cooper lands a quick, sneaky overhand right hand that stuns Holyfield. You see Holyfield staggering to the ropes, and it was an official knockdown. And as Cooper goes on the offensive, Holyfield has remarkable recuperative powers, which he actually does more damage to Cooper than what Cooper did to him in that third round. So, folks, go back and watch that Burt Cooper versus Holyfield round number 3. And that's one of the great rounds of boxing history, along with the round of, when I talked about this, Morales and Herrera, their first fight, round number 5. Definitely back and forth round. Now, boxing scoring works. If there's a knockdown, you scored a 10-8 round. You can actually score that round a 9-9 round because, yes, you give Cooper the credit for the knockdown, but Holyfield actually did more damage and actually almost staggered Cooper, actually did stagger Cooper at the end of that round. So you can actually score that fight a 9-9 round. Now, he won the fight by TKO. Now, what was sweet about that and what really affected my life was when I really understood how an uppercut works on the inside. Again, Burt Cooper, thick neck, wide fighter, wide body. He used the Ken Norton cross arm defense, the George Foreman doing his comeback, the cross arm defense. So a lot of Holyfield's weapons, namely his left hook, was not working on the inside. What did work for Holyfield was the uppercut. The uppercut was the key. And I remember against a thick neck guy, he kept snapping his head back with that uppercut. Now, on a personal note, I remember watching that fight and dealing with the kid I was growing up back in Newark, and we're not going to call his name out, but I remember he and I got into a fight, which is what kids did, and I remember snapping his head back with uppercuts, and all I kept thinking was, I remember Holyfield doing it on Burt Cooper, so if it was good for Holyfield, it's definitely good for a kid. It's definitely good for a kid growing up in Newark, and I remember landing uppercuts, and I definitely backed that kid up off of him. So that's a little bit personal. In June of 1992, defeats Larry Holmes, the former heavyweight champion of the world. Now, in November of 1992, signs for a fight against the unbeaten giant of a heavyweight, one Riddick Bowe. Now, the reason why the Riddick Bowe fight came to be because, again, there was a stall in making a fight versus one Iron Mike Tyson. Now, even though Holyfield, he defeated Douglas, he beat Foreman, he beat Cooper, he beat Larry Holmes, to the mainstream boxing public, to the mainstream media, there was this thought that he was still holding on to a title that really belonged to Mike Tyson. So the fight that everybody wanted to see was Evander Holyfield versus Mike Tyson, so hopefully Tyson can regain his heavyweight championship of the world. Tyson's subsequent rape trial and rape conviction shelved that fight, so now Holyfield turned his attention to a young guy who fought in the 1988 Olympics, one Riddick Bowe, who lost to Lennox Lewis. Now, Riddick Bowe was seen as a fighter, even though he was big, but there were questions about his work ethic. Could he have that dog in him, even though he's from the same Brownsville section of Brooklyn, the same area of Mike Tyson? Did he have that dog in him? What's going to happen if he's pushed into a hard fight? Would he wilt under that kind of pressure? And you saw from the opening bell that Holyfield took the fight to Riddick Bowe, came right at him. He didn't let him breathe. Holyfield was a much larger opponent than Holyfield, 20, 25, 30 pounds. But Holyfield, he took the fight to Riddick Bowe. Now, if you guys don't remember watching Riddick Bowe, Bowe was one of the most skilled big men ever. Problem was he never really developed his skill to the fullest potential, but at that time, in 1992, was trained by the late Eddie Futch, who trained the late Ken Norton, who trained the late Joe Frazier. And Bowe had all the skills. He had a good solid jab, a good overhand right, didn't develop a straight right hand, but a good solid overhand right. And for a guy his size, was a tremendous inside fighter because he had a beautiful uppercut on the inside. And these guys was trading leather. Again, Holyfield trying to push the initiative to Bowe, take him into the proverbial deep waters, test his conditioning and test his cardio, and really in all respect due to Riddick Bowe, because every question that was answered, every question that was asked about his heart, about his desire, was answered that night, because Holyfield came at him and he gave back as good as he got. and traded with Holyfield, and the crowd clearly was into that fight really from opening bell because Holyfield came out trying to push the initiative on Bo. Will versus Will. Eventually started to overcome Evander, was winning his rounds. Evander's eyes started to swell up. So as the fight was building, you saw the crowd getting into it, and one of the great rounds in boxing history was that 10th round. Now, Bo lands a body shot, a quick little body shot on the inside, and lands an uppercut that Evander Holyfield takes the whole punch, head snaps back, and now he is staggered on his feet. No legs. Slams into the ring post. Bo follows him. Bo is throwing everything at him. Throwing everything at him. Even George Foreman on commentary was like, where's the referee to step in? And the referee, could he have stopped the fight? Yes, because even though Holyfield was covering up, he was not defending himself, but this man was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, so he does get the benefit of the doubt. So Holyfield is covering up, and much like in the Burt Cooper fight, his recuperative powers once again were on display, where you could make an argument, he actually did more damage to Bo and landed more punches on Bo than Bo did him, even though he was almost out on his feet. And Wes, if you're listening, I don't know if you remember this, but I came to your house years ago. We're talking about over 15 years ago when I did an experiment, and me and my little brother, we watched that round. I scored the round for Bo. He scored it for Holyfield. And he felt that Holyfield, even though he was hurt, he felt that Holyfield actually did more damage in the round than Bo did, which was a good argument, and that's how some refs could actually score that fight. So, folks, if you don't watch that fight, go back and watch that round, because you thought Holyfield was almost out on his feet and was close to getting knocked out, and came back in that same round to hurt Bo. Not, I'm going to say stagger Bo, but to really get Bo's attention. With all that being said, that 10th round took more out of Holyfield than it did Bo, because in the 11th round, Bo did score an official knockdown against Evander Holyfield, and that won him the title. So Evander Holyfield lost to Riddick Bowe, who became the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Holyfield has a comeback fight against one Alex Stewart, defeats him by unanimous decision in November of 1993. So the first fight was November of 1992. The rematch against Riddick Bowe was November of 1993. Now, that fight was for the WBA and the IBF heavyweight championship, because Riddick Bowe decides to throw the WBC belt in the trash rather than fight one Lennox Lewis. Now, in the rematch, Evander Holyfield made some adjustments. Evander Holyfield was no longer working with Lou Duva and Georgie Benton. Now had Emmanuel Stewart in his corner. The late, great Emmanuel Stewart, probably one of the best boxing trainers, if not the greatest boxing trainer of all time. And employs a strategy to box and move. Now, much like with Buster Douglas, the same thing happened with Riddick Bowe. When you are the heavyweight champion of the world, you have more responsibility, more media responsibility, more appearances responsibility. Now, Bowe's manager, Rock Newman, at the time wanted to market Bowe in the same breath as a Mike Tyson. To market Bowe in the same breath, really, as a Muhammad Ali, where Bowe was taken all over the world, meeting the Pope, meeting Nelson Mandela in South Africa, traveling all over the world, taking pictures, making media appearances. Again, when you have all these obligations, are you really in the gym training like you need to be training? And Riddick Bowe, again, there were questions about his work ethic, questions about his discipline in terms of eating and training and dieting and nutrition. So there's questions about that. So now, when you don't have that structure, are you keeping yourself in shape? Now, even though Bowe did have a comeback, Bowe did have a successful defense against one Jesse Ferguson, but it's Jesse Ferguson. In the rematch versus Holyfield, he came in, much like Douglas, 11 to 12 pounds overweight, and you saw it in his physique. He was not as dialed in or as conditioned as he was in the first fight. Versus Holyfield, who put on 10, 11, 12 pounds of solid muscle. Now, the strategy with Emmanuel Stewart was to box to use technique, speed, and rhythm, things that will make Bo's larger size a handicap for him instead of an advantage. And I thought in those first 6 rounds, I really had Evander Holyfield winning 5 rounds to 1 because I'm talking about even was rocking Bo and had Bo wobble. To me, it was a massive piece. I thought that was one of Holyfield's best fights. He stuck to the game plan. Now, Holyfield's fight or flight, like we all have, his fight or flight syndrome is to actually fight, to stand there and trade. He did that a few times, but I thought all in all, he boxed, he moved, he stayed away from Bo. Yeah, Bo might land a few jabs here and there, but was faster than Bo, was better in shape than Bo, and I thought Holyfield was actually painting a masterpiece and was actually dominating that fight until the 7th round. When the famous fan man, a guy gliding over Caesar's Palace, or well, rather in Vegas, a large propeller strapped to his back, crash lands on the top of the ring ropes, literally in the middle of this heavyweight championship fight. And I remember watching the fight as a child, and me and my dad and I, we couldn't believe what the hell we were watching. And that fight caused a delay of about 20 minutes. And of course, the fight, it was still a very close fight, a very competitive fight, but Holyfield regained the heavyweight championship of the world by defeating Riddick Bowe. The very next fight after that loses to the first ever southpaw heavyweight champion of the world, Michael Moore. And Michael Moore deserved to win that fight. Might have been issues with Holyfield's heart and his health. And that was April '94. And I remember my dad was teasing me about that fight because he was like, hey man, I see they beating your champ. And of course, I didn't like that. You know, my dad always loved to tease me about that. So definitely that's how much I love the Evander Holyfield. In May of 1995, wins a unanimous decision over merciless Ray Mercer. That Holyfield was actually losing the first 5 to 6 rounds of that fight. But Mercer's conditioning or lack thereof proved to be his downfall as Holyfield stepped up his intensity, while his intensity started to wane. Even Holyfield scored the first official knockdown on Ray Mercer and won that fight by unanimous decision in the 10th round. In the third of the Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield trilogy, that happened in November of 1995, where there was some issues with Holyfield's heart. There was issues of possibly. Now, if you listen to Holyfield's explanation on the Legendary Fight series, now I would encourage you all to please watch that. If you listen to Holyfield's explanation, he stated that he had some bad seafood, contracted hepatitis C. The doctors told him that his energy levels would go up and down. If you watch that fight, you could actually believe that story. Even though I've had my criticisms of George Foreman's commentary and his favoritism regarding certain fighters, he clearly was bothered by Holyfield being in the ring that night. And anytime Holyfield was in trouble, you heard George Foreman screaming on the commentary to stop the fight, stop the fight. So it goes to show you that, George does love the sport. But what's funny, Holyfield scores a knockdown of Bowe in the 3rd round. Scores a beautiful left hook, dropped it. And big, huge knockdown. Holyfield couldn't sustain the attack because of his energy levels, and eventually was TKO'd in the 8th round and really looked like a shell of himself. There was issues of him having an enlarged heart. So that's what the doctor said. He had an enlarged heart. They injected him with too much morphine. Holyfield went to a faith healer who healed his heart. So we're not here to discuss science or religion. We're just reporting what happened. Next fight, May of 1996, has a fight against then Showtime announcer one Bobby Chiz. Now, Bobby Chiz, corner stoppage in the 5th round, clearly was a physical mismatch. This was probably the few times in Holyfield's career where Evander actually enjoyed a size advantage, because really Bobby Chiz really a light heavyweight, a cruiserweight, and was only making a foray into the heavyweight division because of the prize money. Of course, that's where the money is. But Chiz could do everything he can do, but just physically was no match for Holyfield. And there was questions whether his eyes was burning, his back was hurting. So either way, it was a referee stoppage in the 5th round. Now, for the next couple of fights is where Evander Holyfield really came to prominence among casual boxing fans. Now, for us hardcore fans, we knew who Evander Holyfield was. For the casual fan, here's where Holyfield really rose to boxing prominence amongst the casual fans. In November of 1996, a TKO victory over one Iron Mike Tyson. Now, to really understand this, I mentioned this before, this fight is 6 years. 6 years in the making. Now, Evander Holyfield was in attendance that night when Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. It was a signed agreement. There was a talk of them fighting again in 1991, but Tyson suffered a rib injury, followed by a subsequent rape trial and rape conviction. Tyson now, while he's in prison, Holyfield established himself as one of the best heavyweights on the planet. Wars with Riddick Bowe and Michael Moore notwithstanding. Again, the last loss to Riddick Bowe kind of looks like a shot fighter, a shell of himself. A really unconvincing win versus Bobby Chiz. You compare that with Tyson, who came out of prison, had fights with Peter McNeely, Buster Mathis, wins the WBC Heavyweight Championship against Frank Bruno, wins the WBA Heavyweight title against Bruce Seldon in September of 1996. And that night he fought Bruce Seldon is the night that Tupac was shot and killed. So in September of 1996, fights again in November of that year against Evander Holyfield. Now, when that fight was first announced, Holyfield was a 25-1 underdog. I think the fight odds went down to 9-1, 6-1 at the time of the fight. And Evander Holyfield in another masterpiece. I can literally watch that fight 1,000 times and actually still get into it. For the masterpiece of just piece de resistance against one Mike Tyson. First round, Mike comes out, throws a haymaker right hand trying to get Holyfield up out of there. Staggers Holyfield, Mike wins the first round. Holyfield makes the adjustments, catches Mike on the inside. As Mike comes charging in, jabs him on the inside, catches him with a left hook on the inside, ties Mike up, ties him up, and pushes Mike back. And that's a strategy. You see it unfolding all night long. Mike comes in on the inside. Again, Mike, short, squat build. For him to do damage, he has to get inside. His uppercuts, his right hands, his combinations, he has to unload them from the inside. Holyfield ties him up, pushes him back, and he keeps him off balance. And you saw this happening in Where's Tyson Down. Holyfield even scores a knockdown of Iron Mike in the 5th round. It was more of a balance, but it's still a score knockdown. So again, Mike is behind on points. And boxing beautifully, taking Mike's bombs. And in the 10th round is when Holyfield really started to physically punish one Mike Tyson. And people watching that, I couldn't believe what was unfolding. And was really starting to batter Iron Mike, where the referee really could have stopped the fight at the end of the 10th round. But give Mike the proud champion that he is. Comes out for the 11th round, and at this point, he's really done. Holyfield unloads on Mike, and really, as the referee, Mitch Halpern, is stepping in to stop the fight, you see Holyfield land one last punch right as the referee steps in, and Holyfield, in another huge upset, defeats Iron Mike Tyson by TKO in the 11th round to become a 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. The rematch, June of 1997, against one Iron Mike Tyson. I thought that Holyfield won the first 2 rounds, again employing the same strategy, hitting Tyson as he was coming in, tying him up on the inside, pushing him back. Mike knew that I need to do something in the 3rd round to stop this momentum. And I thought Mike Tyson was actually winning the 3rd round. That fight came out very aggressive and was winning the 3rd round. And for reasons that Mike says, he got frustrated over the headbutts. His eyes was cut. He got upset at Holyfield for headbutting him. Bites Holyfield. He bites both of his ears. Actually chews a piece of the man's ear off. And is disqualified in the 3rd round in one of the most bizarre incidents in boxing history. So Holyfield has a TKO victory over Iron Mike and a disqualification win over Iron Mike. Now, let me say this. I'm an Iron Mike fan, like you all, and I'm also a Holyfield fan, but I'm really a boxing fan. And there's people who we discuss this all the time. Would Mike Tyson have lost to Evander Holyfield, or would have Holyfield beaten Iron Mike Tyson had they fought in 1990 and 1991? Well, in dissecting that argument, remember, I just told you, when that first Tyson and Holyfield fight was met, Tyson was a 25-1 underdog. The odds went down at the time of fight time, 9-1, 6-1. So you can't say now, when Tyson was a huge favorite, when Holyfield beats him, now all of a sudden is, well, had they fought back then, Tyson would have beat him. You kind of can't have it both ways. Because remember, Don King, and I'm sure also Tyson's camp, figured that Holyfield was a shot fighter, again, being beaten up by Riddick Bowe, really winning an uninspired performance against Bobby Chiz. Mike had made the comeback. He's won the 2 heavyweight championships of the world, had 4 straight comeback fights. So there was a thought that Tyson was going to roll over a shot Evander Holyfield. So you can't say now, if they would have fought in their prime or back in 1990, would Evander Holyfield beat Mike Tyson? I think anytime, any era, Holyfield could beat Mike Tyson, and here's why. Number one, Holyfield was not afraid of Iron Mike. The big part of Mike's invincibility and his aura, along with his skills of boxing, the punches, the combination, the power, along with that was Mike's ability to intimidate his opponents. That advantage was not there with Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was not afraid of any man inside that boxing ring. So that just was not going to happen. So that's number one. Number two, there's an old saying, styles make fights. I think the styles of these two guys, styles make fights, that's just what it is. Is that when Mike charged, and now really understanding Mike Tyson's skill set, for Mike to do his damage, his uppercuts, the bobbing and weaving, the peekaboo defense, is a lot of hip movement, a lot of upper body movement. Again, Mike, thick thighs, thick legs, generating power from the hips and the body. What Holyfield did, again, Holyfield tied up Iron Mike on the inside and pushed him back. Why is that even important? Because again, for Mike Tyson to generate power, he has to be set for him to generate power from his lower body. If he's being pushed back, he cannot generate power. So again, he was keeping Tyson off balance. That's why him pushing Iron Mike back was so important. And again, when Mike did happen to get in, he was catching Mike on the way on the inside, because again, Mike knew based on stature, his physical stature, in order for him to do damage, he has to do damage on the inside. It was not working against one Holyfield because Holyfield tied him up on the inside, and when he got done tying him up, he pushed him back. So Mike essentially has to reset each time on offense. That eventually takes a mental toll on you, that eventually becomes a physical toll on you, where you cannot get off offensively against this guy. So, number one, Holyfield was not afraid of Mike. And number two, styles make fights. And number three, I think a fact that a lot of people really tend to ignore, Holyfield had an iron chin. So I think even if Tyson would have landed some of his punches, which he did in the first fight and a little bit of the second fight, Holyfield could take his punches. So those three reasons why I think had they fought in 1990 or 91, I think Holyfield would have beat Mike Tyson, because number one, he was not afraid of Iron Mike. Number two, he had the style to beat Iron Mike. And number three, he had the chin to take Mike Tyson's punches. In November of 1997, scores a rematch victory over Michael Moore by referee stoppage in the 8th round, winning the IBF Heavyweight Championship of the World. In September of 1998, has a successful title defense against one Vaughn Bean. In March of 1999, has a unification fight against Lennox Lewis. Now, Holyfield is a WBA and the IBF Heavyweight title, while Lewis was the WBC Heavyweight Championship of the World. And anybody watching that fight can tell you that Holyfield clearly lost that fight. I mean, folks, it really wasn't even competitive. Holyfield had talked about a third round prophecy knockout. He was going to knock Lewis out in the third round. And that clearly was the only round he did anything. For he was dominated by Lewis. Lewis jabbed. Lewis threw hard right hands. And really, Lewis should have won that fight hands down. And probably one of the worst boxing decisions in boxing history. That fight was scored a split draw. So they have a rematch in November of 1999. This time, Holyfield loses the undisputed championship to one Lennox Lewis. In August of 2000, in a trio of rather ugly fights against John the Quiet Man Ruiz, wins back the WBA heavyweight title, which is significant because this is now Holyfield becoming the only four-time or to hold a version of the heavyweight championship in the world. So only first four-time and the only four-time heavyweight champion in the world in boxing history was beating John the Quiet Man Ruiz in some rather rough fights. Loses the rematch in March of 2001 by unanimous decision to one John Ruiz, and a draw in December of 2001 to John Ruiz again. Again, some rather boring fights. In June of 2002, a bizarre ending to a Hasim Rahman fight. And by bizarre, and folks, please Google this. Now, Holyfield was winning that fight against Hasim Rahman, who at the time was the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world himself. And they had a clash of heads. And one of the most grotesque and hideous things you have ever seen on a professional prize fighter was a hematoma that grew on the left side of Hasim Rahman's head, where there was an accidental clash of heads, and you all see the blood and everything starting to swell up. And the thing swelled up so good, you saw it go from Rahman's forehead to his temple, almost over his eye. And it looked like it was a baseball inside the man's head, where if it was cut with a scalpel, the blood would have drained out. It was, besides a cut on Vitaly Klitschko's eye against his fight against Lennox Lewis, that was actually one of the wildest things that you have ever seen. Of course, that headbutt, it gave the Tyson supporters, you see, this is what we were talking about why Mike beat Evander, but Hasim Rahman stood in there and fought, even though he was losing that fight. Again, please Google that. A softball in the middle of Hasim Rahman's head due to a headbutt, and that actually stopped that fight. In December of 2002, fought for the vacant IBF heavyweight championship against one Chris Bird, loses by unanimous decision. In October of 2003, has a TKO loss in the 9th round to James Lights Out Tony. In November of 2004, a unanimous decision loss to one Larry Donald. If you guys don't know who Larry Donald is, he's the guy who Riddick Bowe actually sucker punched at a press conference years ago. In November of 2006, a unanimous decision over title contender Fres Oquendo. In June of 2007, a unanimous decision over Lou Savarese. In October of 2007, a unanimous decision loss against Sultan Ibragimov. In December of 2008, a majority decision loss over Nikolai Valuev, the 7-foot Russian fighter. In April of 2010, a TKO victory in the 8th round versus Franz Botha. And in May of 2011, a TKO victory in his last fight, a TKO victory in the 10th round against one Brian Nielsen, the Danish pastry. Folks, let me say this about Evander Holyfield. I truly enjoy watching this man fight. Now, his total fights, 57 total fights, 44 wins, 29 big wins by KO, 10 losses, 2 draws, and 1 no contest. Folks, Evander Holyfield, to me, is a guy that he would be competitive against any fighter from any era, no questions asked. Let me say this again. This guy would be competitive in the era of Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey. You put this man in any era of heavyweight, Sonny Liston, he would be competitive. I'm not saying he would win all those fights, but you would know that he would be in for an exciting fight. He wouldn't get knocked out, and he will fight till the very end. That's the thing that I loved about Evander Holyfield, his willingness to trade, his willingness. Now, even though he was a great boxer, let me say this again, Holyfield had excellent boxing skills. But again, his fight or flight response in the middle of a boxing ring is, if he gets hit, now he has to brawl. He would talk strategy. He would say, I'm gonna box more. And as soon as he get hit on the chin, that he would start brawling. Now, if you look at his boxing skills, he had excellent footwork. He kept his head moving. As he got older, he utilized more of a cross-arm defense. He had a beautiful little short left hook on the inside as well as a right uppercut. And I just love watching this guy. No fear, And the other thing is too, and folks, please go back and watch some of Holyfield's old fights as he's walking to the ring or preparing in the locker room. I have never seen a fighter, and Holyfield's faith is what made him the fighter that he was. And go back and look at the Mike Tyson rematch as it was setting up. He had Mike Tyson listening to some Tupac and hardcore rap music, and Holyfield listening to gospel music and singing to gospel music before you step into the ropes. On his way to the ring against Lennox Lewis in the first fight, the man is singing gospel music. Now, you tell me, when have you seen somebody sing gospel music and beat your ass in the same breath? That's something that I used to always laugh by Holyfield, but again, he is a man of faith, and his faith sustains him. Now, of course, we know we held on a little bit too long, well, a whole lot long, but to say this man is not one of the greatest fighters of all time, and we're talking about fighters of the 90s, of the 80s, this guy was a truth. I enjoy watching Evander, and I just want to say to Evander, if you're listening, brother, I enjoyed you. I can literally think of which Evander Holyfield fight that I want to watch, and I'm still going to be entertained. Again, the Buster Douglas fight, the Burt Cooper fights, the Bowles fights, the Lennox Lewis fights, the Mike Tyson fights, the Dwight Cowie fights. Definitely never in a boring fight, never took a backseat to anybody, was truly a throwback fighter. Definitely wasn't one to be like, well, I need a lion's share of the money. He believed I need to get in the ring and prove that I'm the best. And there's a YouTube video that he gets on Riddick Bowe, because the two of them, they're very good friends. He gets on Riddick Bowe about not fighting Lennox Lewis. So go and YouTube that. There's a video of when he and Riddick Bowe were talking, and he was telling Riddick Bowe that he was always upset with Bowe, the fact that he would never fight Lennox Lewis. And Bowe was trying to give excuse, and Holyfield wasn't having it. He was calling Riddick Bowe out to say, no, you were the champion and you should have fought this guy. So Holyfield fought every fighter of his generation. Every top contender, every competitor, every challenger, he fought them all. He fought Burt Cooper, Douglas, Foreman, Tyson, Lewis, Bowe. Those were the fighters of his era. So Evander Holyfield from Chin Check Radio, we want to say, and we are proud to discuss your legacy, and we hope to all my listeners and subscribers, how, when, and where you are listening to us, we hope that this finds you. And until the next time, this is Chin Check Radio. Signing out.